Jesus Christ. Hello? Guys, if is my mic buzzing or is it okay? If it's not okay, can you tell me in the chat?
It's a little bit static.
It's a little bit. Okay. Hello? I'm sorry if my mic isn't working that well. Hopefully it's okay for you guys. But according to my friends, it's buzzing a bit, if I'm not mistaken. But can you guys hear me well? Or is it buzzing? Is it not okay? Please do tell me before we start.
It is still buzzing, but I think it's okay lah.
Okay lah. Okay. I'm very sorry. There might be a technical problem at my side. Very sorry. So please bear with me. We'll get through this. So hopefully it doesn't go too bad. Okay. I'm so sorry for the buzzing. Okay then. So right now here it shows 9:15 p.m. Hopefully we can start. I guess we can start about now. It's already been 50 minutes past our actual starting time. So is Laura here? Hopefully she's here. Okay. Laura, I'm so sorry if my mic is buzzing first and foremost. Okay, so I'm not going to take much of your time. So my name is Arif Hakimi. You can call me Arif or Hakim, according to your preference. So I'm from Malaysia, from your ATM. I'm just in my degree, semester 5. I bet a lot of people here are also in their degree, and some of your friends too from Bartlett that are joining here currently. So thank you to all that's joining today. Hopefully you still till the end, because Laura will be showing her presentation on rendering, hopefully today. So I'm not going to be speaking much. So my background would be I represent I'm from the Architectural Society in UiTM. So yeah, that's basically it, really. So I guess I'll give it to Laura now. So thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Let's see if this will work. All right. Can you guys see my screen? Ooh. Oh God. Oh, right. Okay. File. Can you guys see my screen?
No, not really, actually.
Hey,
No.
yes, I can see it.
Oh, you can?
Seriously?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, we can see.
Yes, yes, true.
Okay. Okay. Do you want it full screen or would you like it like this?
I think it's better full screen, I guess.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, then now I can see it.
Using Google Meets and Zoom, it's changing between the two. So hi, thank you so much for inviting me to do this talk. So my name is Laura Kay. I graduated from Bartlett last summer and I was in Unit 12. So that's with the tutors Jonathan Hill and Elizabeth Dow. So this evening I'm going to talk about rendering, so not the typical computerized rendering, but manual renderings and mediums. So I think a really good starting point is to say even the best drawings start from a sketch. And I think it's really important to pick up on that. So I know myself, when I look at some other people's drawings, I'm like, how on earth did you do that? And it's pretty much the majority of the time, it always starts off with a scribble. And that also goes for computerized drawings too. So for each project, I always ask myself these questions that I always kind of keep in mind, which I thought would be quite useful for you guys whilst you're studying and then also whilst you move into work. So firstly, consider how is the best way for you to show the narrative of your project. So this can vary from a presentation, drawings, a model, or kind of like a whole hybrid of them all. And it's about finding the best medium for yourself. So allowing yourself for experimentation of your design, so say the form, materiality, or creating a hybrid, and also finding the best medium in order for you to communicate your design to. So for example, these are a selection of 3 completely different projects. So firstly, here is my 4th year project. So this is when I started using Big Biro for rendering. I call them like big scribbles, which I found really helpful with developing my project and the ethos of it. So I'm going to talk about my 5th year project later on, and you'll kind of find out more about that. And then this is my 3rd year project. So this was a mix of photoshopped collages and models to form these vignettes to create these little perspectives. And then thirdly, it's a competition project. So this was a mix of model making, so checking everything would work for CNCing, and then axiometrics to help with the construction of it. So I just kind of want to show that you can have a variety of different types of drawings within your portfolios. So I personally use manual rendered drawings in collaboration with all my technical drawings. And I think it kind of lends a hand in understanding the design and also demonstrating the constant thought of construction and just always thinking about how can it be built. So these following Biro drawings, they all start off from a sketch. So the process that I would do is I take the sketch, then go into 3D modeling. So I use Rhino personally, and then I export and print the line work. And then it's what I call the Biro scribbles on top. And it's kind of this process of constantly going over the design, tweaking elements, and it's a process that's kind of never fully finished. And for myself personally, kind of using a Biro allows me to really develop the design further. So a big Biro for me is kind of part of my architectural tool set. So now I'm going to kind of expand this and kind of show you the mix of all the different types of drawings and the process of drawing and how it's kind of really integrally integrated into my thesis project. So I was exploring the term of ruralism. So post-productivist English rural is conceived and appeals in populist cultural terms as a site of safety, tranquility, community, anti-modernity, small-scaleness, and Old England. So we have this presumption that there is this loss via the theory of polarity, and that the urban, this place of bureaucratic anti-rural governance and nationalistness, threatens the existence of this exotica, the English countryside. So the government's white paper definition of differentiating these classifications of rural and urban is that rural is based on population and settlement patterns rather than how much countryside there is. So therefore, an area of rurality is defined as an area in which the residential population is less than 10,000 per hectare. So then this would be London following this condition. So on this diagram down here. So this always questions our perception of what is rural. So do we admire the countryside as a collection of contingent forms that have lost their raison d'etre, or as something modelled by our times or an ancient imagination? So the overall aim of this project was to explore the possibility of the New English rural. So it's not about the movement of people from urban to rural. Instead, it's essentially a code for living by proposing a new and more refined approaches to how we might choose to construct and live in the not too distant future. So kind of steering with this mentality, the New English rural will be an endogenous development. And endogenous means it comes from its origin. So kind of emphasising that the rural will be defined by its networks, in which heterogeneous entities are aligned in a variety of ways. So it's also to propose that these networks will give rise to slightly different rurals, as there's no single vantage point from which the whole monopoly of rural or countryside can be seen. So it's creating this diverse rural developments across the UK. And it's quite important to point out that the new rural would not be a subgenre of the urban, but rather a hybrid of the best aspects of both rural and urban. So this is a condition called super rural. So this endogenous development has been previously characterised as Janus-faced, so desiring to look inwards to mobilise local actors and including local businesses and community groups as well as resources. So therefore, it shall not be about new things being added to establish situations. The policies will focus on strengthening proven constellations and supporting the emergence of new ones. So a consequence will be the shift of attention from the new to the old, the big to the small, and the spectacular to the mundane. And this was explored through the intervention of the design of some catalysts. But firstly, it's important to kind of outline what the New English Rural would be. So it's a code of living accordingly. It may help determine how we might choose to live and work as our climate and economy both shifts, changes and shrinks. So firstly, the first law was nothing goes to waste. So the seemingly mundane and infuriating activity of maintenance is the main priority of the new rural. So recognising what is necessary and efficient for the continued functioning and elaboration of the endogenous development. So the focus is upon the term terrotechnology. So this translates from Latin to mean to watch, to observe and to guard. So currently in the UK, 44% of our waste is from the construction industry. So the new rural paradigm will open up the opportunity for a new constructional paradigm by tackling the reuse of waste in an integrated approach. So this is a much needed transformation in the construction industry and will be implemented, providing traditional construction companies an opportunity to engage in the era of this new construction paradigm. So one that will surely have a significant number of impacts, including economically, socially, environmentally and architecturally. So the ethos of nothing goes to waste, this will filter down to alter the consumption of the consumer and vice versa. So it's kind of re-educating us on what's necessary and what's discretionary. Secondly, an appreciation of our surroundings. So this Janus-faced development needs to reach out beyond its locality to be successful. So considering the constructional materials on the site, nearby and further afield. So this would generate an appreciation for the availability of the materials, their properties, locality, and the applicable skills of the labour required to craft this. So intertwining the recognition and the terrotechnology, the application of building passports for all the materials is incorporated through the means of identification code system. So there's kind of two ways that these building passports help. So firstly, the building passports form a visual language throughout the building. So as the coding system is visible on the materials, it's kind of acting as the celebration of the heritage of these endogenous materials. And secondly, the coding helps with both the production and the in-use cycle of the material's life. So it's kind of aiding with the cyclic nature of install, use, maintain, disassembly and reuse. And then thirdly, we have seasonally bound. So the New English Rural is inherently linked and bound by the seasons and the altering environmental conditions of the site. So emphasising the qualities of this paradigm, that each endogenous development will give rise to slightly altered architecture. So due to the differing environmental conditions across the nation, there shall be a disparate rate of choreography of terrotechnology in comparison to one another. So this will be applied to a somewhat counterintuitive testbed site to what we might judge to be rural. So this is on a brownfield site in Rochester. So for you guys, it's about 30 miles away from London. And this is a place which is struggling both socially and economically. And there are kind of two reasons why I went for this site. Firstly, the perception of urban and rural. So Rochester lost its city status due to a governmental error. And secondly, the urban development of the city, of the place, was catalysed by this infrastructure of a bridge. So it kind of opens up the question of what would be the catalyst of the New English Rural. So the paradigm will be implemented through the production and construction of a series of catalysts to explore whether a development that draws on local rural resources could aid in reducing the deprivation of the city. So whilst also demonstrating that the proposal of rural architecture may not necessarily evolve from an existing rural community. So overall, it's kind of exploring whether a rural life can contribute to an urban community's well-being and future development. And it kind of looks at providing the stable employment and education needed to allow for growth within the economy of this endogenous development. So the catalysts act as these mechanisms to implement the ethos of the New English rural. So through these speculations of an altered way of living and manufacturing. So this will be evidenced where the functions come to enrich the fabric and the individual gains new freedom of action through a new and shuffled order based on interconnection, close-knit patterns of association and possibilities of growth and change. So seen over time via the ever-changing layering of the landscape and the architecture. So before the application of this new rural ethos of the catalysts, it's important to point out how the endogenous element affects the resources of the architecture. So due to the nature of a Janus-based development, all materials must be located within 50-mile radius of the site. And this kind of highlights the advantage of using local materials and techniques as a factor of local socio-economic development. So currently in the UK, there's a major net importer of building products, so including many that could be replaced by those grown in our climate. So then this could bring benefits to the economy as a whole through the creation of jobs and an improved balance of trade. So this opens up the opportunity for non-typical constructional timbers to be introduced into the construction. So normal constructional timbers, say English oak, they surpass 50 years before they can then be felled and then used within construction. So this allows for the introduction of faster growing timbers that at their earliest takes 2 years before they can be coppiced and then used for construction. And this kind of results in a collective of new timbers that are native to the UK, but not predominantly used within the construction industry. So these can be introduced and popularised into this endogenous material resource economy, and consequently the constructional materials of the architecture will illustrate kind of this close relationship of the characteristics of the site's lithology, climate, crop and forest cover as they are used. So before the elaboration of the construction of these catalysts, it's also vital to consider the workers' existing and developing skills and what consequences that shall bring to the architecture as well. So as the result of, as the quality of the result is not predetermined, but depends on the judgment, dexterity and care which the worker exercises as they work, the essential idea is that the quality of the result is continually at risk during the process of making. So as their skills develop through a 6-year course, this is closely linked with that of the newly introduced coppiced timbers, and the structures over time will become this taxonomy of joints. Another visual method of acknowledging this taxonomy is also the creation of this building datum system. So overall, the equation would be datum plus length times number of materials equals the rate of terratechnology. So through the longevity of the structures, there'll kind of be these seasonal changes, which can be inferred through the storage of the materials, which is coherently linked to terratechnology, thus acting kind of as the sign of altering environmental conditions. So, for example, a decrease infers that environmental change has been extreme. So this requires a greater material consumption and the production of the New English rural, needing a greater rate of choreography of terratechnology and vice versa. So in other words, the buildings have needed more maintenance, so you have to use more of the materials to kind of care for those existing buildings. And then this also addresses currently the longevity of the material is primarily dictated by its role within the building model. So the New English Rural takes a different stance on this. So rather than dependency on its role within the building, it's a material's property commends it to have a longer lifespan. So then it may be reused into a different layer of the building and into a different role than beforehand. And now I'm going to highlight these ethoses of the New English Rural through some of the selected catalysts. So firstly, we have the factory. So this is going to display the choreography of terror technology. So the active choreography of terror technology transforms the building site to become this locus of confrontation between the conscious and subconscious intentions of the workers. The impossibility of predicting the outcome forces the workers to constantly readjust this line. So the overall outcome is to consider the chance of more efficient and economical maintenance with the possibility to replace piece by piece without changing the structure of the building. So the New English Rule puts forth the argument that material can have multiple functions, so throughout its constructional lifespan. So this concept is also incorporated programmatically to the elements of the architecture. So walls can be pushed down to become floors to allow workers to move from one space to another. And it's kind of highlighted here that catalysts over time will become conglomerates of spare or unrequired materials that accumulate upon this primary structure. So they can be ready to be dismantled and integrated within another catalyst across the development. So this is one of the workspaces which highlights the altered mindset that towards waste creates the necessity to exploit every single material. So beforehand here, you have your normal kind of cut timbers, and here it's kind of using those ones which are a bit more wavy and using those instead. So the catalysts invoke a conception of time, which is both instantaneous and eternal, through the choreography of terror technology. So instantaneous in the moment of integration, so it kind of acts as this dot on a timeline, which then stretches out slowly through the meticulous removal and addition of old and new materials. So secondly, we have the seasonal clock. So due to this nature of terror technology, the catalysts take into consideration the potential causes of deterioration over time. So the service life of a demountable timber piece is affected by the cycle of seasons, and these kind of impose their rhythm and shapes upon the building, as well as the previous design and storage of the material. So therefore, every joint has a number of demountable cycles. So here shows the seasonal practice of applying the winter jacket to wrap up the structures up for the winter months and to kind of reduce the rate of maintenance during the summer. Another seasonal practice is that of a protective ink. So in the process of prolonging a material and giving rise to the darkness of the architecture, like that of old fishing huts, instead of weathering patina, alternatively, the buildup of this ink kind of acts as its own patina, kind of demonstrating this annual obligation to apply the coating to reinforce the membrane. So at the beginning of the development, there is the use of materials which are already existing on the site. So the first production units extract these natural clays and silts from subsoils. So due to this kind of variable existing skills of the workers, the material palette allows for the training of the basic techniques of construction. So establishing ease of production for lower skilled workers, as they use these materials so they can be moulded, hydrated, pressed, spread, rolled, compacted, thumped, torn, cracked, joined again, dried, ripped and hydrated once again, which kind of allows for this experimentation of use. So progressing this idea, the previous industrial past of the site has left the land scattered with remnants of its industrial past. So from objects to existing building structures, the experimentation and the hybridization will be explored via this catalyst, the bells of production. So this catalyst integrates the existing gas holder and the water tanks that have been left on the land. And it kind of functions as a collection of rainwater into the tanks. So this is released to increase the volume within the canal lock system, which raises the barges that contain imported endogenous constructional materials, which can then be checked on the platform of the customs house. And kind of due to the weight distribution of the rainwater, these reverberations are transferred through the gas holder structure, jolting the bells to ring out. So following the ethos, once materials have reached the end of their structural lifespan, it is readdressed to become one of the bells of production. So instead of ringing out to signify a change in time, the noise signifies the incoming of new material ready to be integrated into the site. So through the production of the New English Rural, it educates the workers to develop a sensitivity towards the materials. So creating an understanding of potential causes of deterioration, maintenance required for certain joints, and the prevention of others to sustain this collage. So similar to the manner of maintaining a hedgerow, the materials are weaved, cut, pulled, mushed and tied into place, and it forms these hybrids of different materials. So these portions are of an elevation in the winter and the summer, and this is kind of demonstrating this ever-changing layering of the elevation within the seasons. So you can have rain gutters, which kind of act as dust collectors in the summer from the cracking of this protective ink, which is kind of moulded back into the materials. And this is an axis of that taxonomy of the joints of that elevation. So this is kind of demonstrating that it acts as a record of the quality of the joints in terms of how they fulfill their allotted tasks, as it can only be assessed by many years of practical application. So a joint might turn out to be unnecessary, excessive safety measure, which owes to its existence to an unquestioning loyalty of tradition of the workers. So demonstrating that readily grown available timbers with the naturally grown curves could indeed be more beneficial than those obtained from the straight manufactured timbers. So I kind of like to finish off by kind of bringing the collective of all these ideas together and kind of to demonstrate that this is kind of a continual site of production. So despite only being applied to the testbed site in Rochester, the collective ethos can be applied further afield, as the New English Rural sets a focus towards each site's idiosyncrasies, in which specific policies are adapted to the context of the site, as it's dependent on its endogenous materials, workforce and environmental conditions. This enables support of sustainable local development whilst preserving the cultural heritage of construction knowledge inherent to its region. So kind of highlighting that the New English Rural will give rise to slightly different rurals. So there is no single vantage point from which the whole monopoly of rural can be seen. So one creating diverse rural developments across the UK. So this would be the rituals of the landscape of Rochester. The New English Rural is not proposing anything new, rather that it is looking to the past, whilst also the future, to understand what we need today. So about within his book, The Shock of the Old, there's this assumption that the new is much superior to older methods. And this is, however, in most cases untrue. So the illustration is, and it's kind of acting as a tool for me to observe and illustrate the extent of the process and tools of construction of this future society of the UK. Do you guys have any questions you'd like to ask me?
Hello?
Hello.
Hopefully we can get on to the questions and answers. So I guess thank you very much to Laura for presenting on her presentation on her insight to the New English Rural Project. Thank you so much for presenting on that. Okay, but again, to anybody that just came in, very sorry if there's any problems with my mic or whatsoever. I think we'll start off with the question. With a very simple question. What do you think, personally, in your opinion, brings more impact in terms of presentation-wise? Something of manual renderings or something more digital? Because throughout your presentation, I was so intrigued by looking at how detailed you render all of your drawings. And I think, for me personally, I think that brings a different impact. But what is your perspective on that? Why not do something digital instead? Why do you go and have a take on that manual approach?
I think it's completely dependent on the project, to be perfectly honest. I personally find, hand rendered drawings I find them so beautiful because they're actually done by the hand of the person, and you're not kind of constantly relying on a computer to kind of add in the lighting and the shade and adding in kind of the assorted materials that a computer rendering system already has. From you doing it personally, you can create it yourself, and it can be something that's completely different to what a computer would kind of produce. I think that's what I'd say.
That's understandable. Very true, understandable. Okay. I've got another question here in chat from Nur Abia. I would like to ask, how many days or time did you take to do your research? That some of my friends were asking too. How long did you take for your research, actually?
So the unit I was in, so in unit 12, we do it where we do research and your drawings at the same time. So the information and the research that you find, you kind of then implement that into a drawing that you're doing. So it's kind of you're constantly learning from what you're researching. And it's not kind of like you have a lump sum of days where you do your research and then do the work. It's kind of integrated between both of them and kind of constantly swapping from what you're doing. So I can't depict, a certain day or time, but it's kind of a simultaneous thing that you've got to do, which is a bit hard, but it's okay.
So basically you're saying it's something more progressive, I guess. It's not something that you take one day off and you do all your research in just like 1 week or 1 day. It's something like,
No.
you take it on, okay.
Yeah.
So I think what most people are asking is that, what is your biggest challenge during this particular project? What was the biggest difficulty you faced while doing this particular project? Was it the research? Was it the rendering? Was it the drawings? Was it the difficulty with consulting your lecturers, your tutors, or what was it particularly?
I think it was finding a good mix between doing the biro drawings and then also the more technical line drawings. I think with myself, when I do my design projects, it's always constantly, I want to know, how can I build it? Which is what I always want to know. And what I find sometimes is with the biro drawings, people look at them and they go, oh, but that couldn't be built though. Like it's not actually, you couldn't do that. So it's kind of having those additional drawings, which are done in a different style, to complement the two. So you can look at it as 2 pages and go, okay, that bit goes here and this is how it all works. So it makes it a lot easier. That would be the most difficult thing that I did.
Okay. So I think a follow-up question on that, particularly on the construction part. You said like some of your friends or some of your may approach you and say, oh, that must not be buildable. How does that even see? Because when the first time I ran through your page and I looked, like, oh my God, what is she doing? So many complicated things that goes here and goes there. I wouldn't really understand unless you explained it to me. So how was it, particularly for construction-wise? How was it for you? How difficult was it for you? Did you have to? Was it something that you did on your own, or did your lecturers help you in terms of the consultation of the design? How did you get into the construction of your project, actually?
So when we were doing this thesis project, we also had to do a written dissertation as well. So in our 4th year, we did a big technical report, which I was one of those rarities where I absolutely loved doing it because it was figuring out how you put everything together. So I kind of did the same with my thesis. So that was all about how you can kind of take this kind of axonometric and how could you kind of explode it all and put it all together. And I think construction wise, it's not complicated. I think it may look slightly complicated because I'm trying to show that it's this ever-growing layering of all these different joints being put together and trying to show it over a period of time rather than showing it in kind of its first few years, well, when it will just be this primary structure.
So I'd like to dig into a bit into your project, if you don't mind, about the New English Rule. A part of me wants to ask, when you did, let's say, the site analysis, I think that's the most basic thing for us. The first thing that we do is the site analysis, understanding the context and whatnot that goes into the site before we apply our construction on the site itself. What sort of site study did you do before in understanding the constructions of the context before you came up with your own design, personal design?
So the reason why
was it? Sorry.
So the reason why I was drawn to that site was I was trying to find a place where it didn't have a clear distinction between rural and urban. And Rochester is one of the most deprived areas in the UK. And I think there's this thought process that, you know, if you've got a rundown area, you then have to implement and put loads and loads of flats or put loads of shops and all of that to kind of boost it up. So making it more urban in that retrospect. So I think it was quite interesting to kind of explore it going, no, you don't need to make it like this. This was an old brownfield site, which used to be one of the major industrial elements of Rochester. It used to have all of these ports, which would go around it, because it's one of the main rivers. And it was kind of going, no, you don't need to do this. You can actually do something completely different, which can help with the socioeconomics of that area, rather than kind of bringing in all of these heavy embodied carbon materials and kind of bringing those all in and transforming it from a brownfield site to, you know, just like your regular brick buildings, which you can find anywhere.
Understandable. Okay, we got a question from Lee Han. May I ask, how do you do your research and data collection?
Lots of reading, lots and lots of reading, as you can see from the bookcase behind. I think the most useful bit of information or advice I got was just start reading from like theory writers, because I just think you can, if you hop onto a theory that's really, really useful, you can signify that within your design and you can just make it a lot easier. But also, I mean, apart from reading, just go to your library, all that stuff. That's all I did. Just a lot of reading. Get your highlighters out as well.
Another question, hopefully that answers the question by Lee Han. Okay, we got another question here on YouTube, also live on YouTube right now, would you believe, by Sophie. Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. What advice would you give to your undergrad student self? In terms of creative thought processes?
Firstly, get some sleep. Don't worry at all. You're going to be fine. I think it's when you're at undergrad, when you get given a brief, you constantly think you need to have the finished design by the end of that week when you're showing your tutor. And I'm telling you, you do not need to do that. You do not do that in practice. You know, from practice, when you get a brief, it can take you like 4 or 5 months to get to planning. So I think it's giving yourself a bit of a break. You know, not everything you're going to do every single week is going to be absolutely perfect, and it's going to be part of the design at the end of it. It's about doing these iterations, and the design will get better slowly. So it's kind of from back in the presentation where I said each great drawing starts from, you know, it could be a rubbish sketch, it can be on a napkin, you know. Just don't put so much pressure on yourself all the time.
Thank you very much. Question by Sophie. We got another one by Muhammad Zikri. Are there any writers or books you would like to recommend to these people? Any personal favorites in books?
Aldo Rossi, The Architecture and the City. Oh God, there's loads. I'll write down a list for you guys if you'd like. But I think it's kind of just exploring. Do you know if it's somebody that you just think you're not going to enjoy it, it's going to be rubbish? Just give it a few pages, just read it a little bit, because there might be bits and pieces that you might agree with, and you might just get really into it. But just give it a bit of faith.
Oh man, okay. I'd like to follow up on what you said before. You didn't want to take the approach on where it's something more generic. You didn't want to build stuff like flats or something on your site particularly. My question to you, based on your studies or your readings, were there some sort of negative social implications when we do build flats or any sort of generic buildings? What is your opinion on that?
I think it takes away from the uniqueness of an area. I think at the moment with development homes, you know, for example, there are loads of development brands, but I'm going to go for David Wilson. You can have David Wilson up in Scotland, London, Wales. They all look the same. They are all made from basically the same brick, and there's no kind of characteristic uniqueness that we kind of used to have throughout the country. I don't know what it's like in Malaysia, but you know, it's kind of moving away from the traditional building materials which are within that site. So, you know, you've got some buildings where there's a quarry nearby, so they'll use the stone from there. And now it's just completely changed because it'd probably be cheaper to go get some brick from over in Europe. And it's just like, you've got to change that mindset a bit.
Okay, I think follow up on that. I'd like to ask, would you say how would you look at it as let's say your project right now, if you placed it at another site, would you have come up with something different, or would you still stick to your particular materials that or your idea that you came up with in the first place, or your concept that you got up with?
So the ethos in New English Rural, that would stick their kind of ways of living and kind of basic rules, I would say. But, you know, material wise, it would completely change. It was using this endogenous development, so using materials within a 50-mile radius. And it's kind of going, okay, we can't go without this radius. What have we got? What can we use? And how can we use it to its full potential? Which I think at the moment, you know, with RIBA, it's, you know, you look at doing a building for 60 years. And I think you've got to look further afield and think about a building's going to last a lot longer than just 60 years.
I want to dig in a bit into your background, if you don't mind. Would you say that your tutors have brought a very big impact on you, let's say in your undergrad and your postgraduate, right? So would you say your tutors have made a different change of perspective into you? How did your tutors impact you in any way?
My tutors were great. I think it was more I went with an idea of what I was interested in, and Jonathan and Elizabeth are very good in going, okay, well, if you're interested in it, push it. You know, don't just go for the standard stuff which has been done before. You know, there's make, do, and mend, and that whole kind of World War II ethos, and they're going, okay, there's that, but push it further. You know, the whole point about being an architecture student is experiment, because sometimes you may not be able to do that when you're in practice. It's your time to, you know, explore what you're really, really interested in. So then when you go to a practice, you go, okay, this is what I'm into. And they might kind of have the same ideas as well. So then you can bring it forward into your kind of practice life.
No, thank you very much. We've got another question here on YouTube. Sometimes we can lose the working momentum along the way. Have you ever been through that, and how do you deal with it? Losing that momentum, ever feeling down or depressed? How do you overcome that?
I think it's always good to have a good bunch of people around you. So we're kind of your student friends, because you're all going through the same thing. You know, it all happens. We all know. Even your tutors know, they've gone through it as well. I think a really good thing that I implemented in masters was Sunday is off day. Do not do anything on a Sunday. And it's just that day of just relaxing, chilling, you know, binge some TV, make a really good meal, because sometimes you can come up with ideas whilst you're taking that time off. You don't have to constantly be on 100% all the time.
We've got a question in the chat by Aina. Mind if I ask you for your opinion? Is it necessary for learning students to come up with a design identity through their studies? Or would it be better if we were to explore architecture as a whole first? What is your opinion on that?
I think when you're at undergrad, you get a basic understanding of kind of the whole of architecture. I think that's what undergrad is for. And I think masters is picking out a collection of bits of architecture that you really enjoy. You know, that can be through different architects that you like, theorists, or different ways of designing. But you kind of, I don't know quite how to explain this. You kind of get to a point where you have your own architectural style, but you won't kind of you don't define it yourself. It kind of just happens very naturally. So if you don't have one at the moment, you probably do, you just don't really know yet.
Understood. Thank you very much for the question. And also, so next we have Jessie. Is there any social science topics that interest you and allows you to integrate it into your architecture studies?
Oh God, okay. I think a lot of it was a mix of, probably this project was based on social sciences and then also material constructional science as well. And it's kind of the jamming of the two. And I think a lot of it for me was because a lot of the work is about construction and how you put the stuff together. It was about considering what the workers are like. So considering the skill set that they already have and so on. And kind of coming up with what the architecture could potentially be in 50 years, and then integrate and then thinking about, okay, what are the people going to be like? How are they actually going to come up with the skill set that they need to be able to build this, but also how are they going to look at, you know, if you've got a bit of a leak, are they going to walk past it and be like, oh, it's just a little leak, leave it? And then when you go past it 2 years later, it's a massive gash that's in your building. It's about kind of having a consideration about how people will react to something. And it's kind of, I think that's why I kind of say within the project, it's kind of this constant battle of, do you need to do it, or could you just leave it for a little bit longer and it'll be absolutely fine?
Thank you for the question, Jessie. I think I got a follow-up question myself. I actually want to ask you, I think I face a bit problems, okay, for problem myself. I think during research or the site analysis phase, particularly because how important is it to you to understand the site particularly before you proceed on to your designing phase? Let's say, so my particular problem would be I get the gist of the site, particularly I research a bit, understand the site, understand the context, just getting a gist of it, how the construction is there, what the materials are used there, how the people are like there, something just very rough gist, and then I go on to my designing phase. So how important is it for you during this new English rural project for you to understand the context? Did you allocate your time equally in the research and also in your designing phase, or was it 90% designing and just about like 10% in your research? How was it for you? How did you allocate your time?
God, it was probably 60% research and then 40% design. It was really integral to kind of figure out my site because it's all to do with the materials which are within that 50-mile radius. I think it was also important to consider the people that are there. So for these catalysts, they would implement on working, economics, and so on. But if it was implemented in a different area, so say Blackpool, those catalysts may need to react to completely different situations over there. And then you've also got the integration of there may be different materials, so it'd be completely varying from wherever you went.
For that, okay. I think we'll take the last question here. By Nia on YouTube. Hi, I have a question. What are your thoughts on sociology based on architecture? Is there any course out there, or we just have to learn it ourselves?
Say that question again.
What are your thoughts on sociology based on architecture? I'm guessing sociology based on architecture. Are there any courses out there, or do we have to learn it by ourselves? I think this was relating to Jesse's question about social science topics. So about, are there any particular courses that you take formally, or was it something that you learned it by yourself?
I think it's probably a combination. I don't think you can necessarily learn everything from a book. I think it's about you learning yourself. I think over the years doing architecture at school and then also working, you do build up kind of an understanding about it all. It takes time. It does. You do get there. I mean, it's really good.
Okay. So I guess we have gone through all the questions today. Join me in thanking Laura for presenting her project for today and also an insight into her renderings. Thank you very much to Laura for presenting her project. Appreciate it very much for making your time and presenting your work. Thank you so much. I know you're busy with your work too. So wish us luck also. We have our submissions in about 2 weeks. So thank you so much for sharing your work.
And thank you for staying up on a Saturday night. I mean, that is dedication.
Thank you again. Thank you to everybody that has joined. We've got a total of 100 plus people here, 50 here on Meet and also plus 60 on YouTube, I think. So thank you again to Laura. Thanks everybody for joining. If anything, you can ask Laura on her Instagram. You can personally DM her on LalaKeay, yeah? LalaKeay. Please do ask her anything you want, particularly about her projects, about her work. She's a very nice person to contact too. But again, thank you so much, and thank you for staying until the end. So see you guys in the next session. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank
Bye.
you.